New details pouring in at this hour about yesterday's horrific shooting, targeting GOP lawmakers practicing for a charity baseball game. This as the number 3 in the House leadership, Louisiana Congressman Steve Scalise, remains in critical condition and will require more surgeries. 3 others were also shot and injured. This is Outnumbered. I'm Sandra Smith. Here today, host of Kennedy on Fox Business, Kennedy. Also from FBN, the anchor of the Intelligence Report, Trish Regan. Democratic strategist and senior director of research for Bustle.com, Jessica Tarlov is here. And today's hashtag one lucky guy, Brian Kilmeade, co-host of Fox and Friends and host of his nationally syndicated radio show, Kilmeade and Friends, and he is outnumbered. We thought you didn't have enough to do today, Brian.
Right, I know. But I don't know if we want to give away our secret that you were just on the show. Ooh. We were just on the radio show.
And I also want to point out that Jessica Tarlov is here for the first time.
I'm so excited.
Wow.
And I am this couch for a long time.
I'm sorry that we had to sit you two next to each other, but that'll work.
Why is that? Why are you sorry? That was a little offensive.
Yeah, just setting this up. All right, but there's a lot going on. Let's get right to it. It may be a long road to recovery for Congressman Scalise. The House Majority Whip in critical condition and will require more surgery. Doctors saying the bullet that tore into him traveled across his pelvis, fracturing bones, injuring internal organs, and causing severe bleeding. Doug McKelway joins us live from the Washington Hospital Center, where the congressman is being treated. Our thoughts are with him. What is the latest there, Doug?
Well, the latest is that Vice President Pence and his wife Karen visited Scalise here at MedStar Hospital early this morning. And shortly after their visit, the Vice President tweeted out a photograph and these words saying, "Karen and I just left MedStar. Thank docs and staff. Keep Steve Scalise, Officer Griner, and all involved and their loved ones in your prayers." There's really no new word on Scalise's condition since that statement from the hospital came out at 8:15, a portion of which you just read last night, conveying the true gravity of the situation here. In many respects, that report raises more questions than it answers because the pelvis, as we all know, protects so many vital organs from the bladder to the intestines, the base of the spine. So it raises many, many daunting questions about the recovery ahead that lies ahead for Steve Scalise. Last night after his surgery, President Trump and First Lady Melania visited Scalise accompanied by aides, including Sean Spicer. They were seen bringing 2 bouquets of flowers in. The personal physician of the president was also in attendance, conferring with doctors here. The first couple sat down by his bedside, but it is unclear whether Mr. Scalise was conscious at the time. Afterwards, the president tweeted, and I quote, "Just left the hospital. Rep. Steve Scalise, one of the truly great people, is in a very tough shape, but he is a real fighter. Pray for Steve." The president also met with a Capitol Police Officer, Crystal Griner, who was wounded in the leg and who, along with the other Capitol Police Officer, David Bailey, was credited with bringing the gunman down and saving a lot of lives. Another one of the wounded, Zach Barth, who is an aide to Congressman Roger Williams, was shot through the calf, and remarkably, he was back at work in the Capitol today. And Brian Kilmeade, I know you had a chance to speak to him on Fox and Friends this morning. Here's a bit of what he had to say.
Then I see him turn his gun towards me, and it just starts popping all around me. He hits me in my leg, and at that point, my adrenaline is pumping, and my fight or flight reflexes, they take control. And I decide if I want to live, I need to get to better cover. So I sprint down, running for my life, sprint down the first base line into the dugout, and I just jump in, and I jump into the arms of the congressman.
Meanwhile, family members of Matt Micah, who is head of government relations for Tyson Foods, say that he was shot multiple times. He remains in intensive care and in critical condition at George Washington University Hospital. And lastly, we know that the entire Scalise family, as well as all of his aides, will be at tonight's baseball game. Promises to be an incredibly emotional experience for all involved, no doubt. Back to you, Sandra.
All right, Doug McKelway, thank you. Meanwhile, we're learning more about the shooter and his violent past. James Hodgkinson's arrest record includes a history of domestic violence. The 66-year-old home inspector was also a Bernie Sanders supporter who raged against Republicans and President Trump on his Facebook page. In one post back in March, Hodgkinson writing, quote, "Trump has destroyed our democracy. It's time to destroy Trump and company." Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is live with brand new details. Catherine?
Well, thank you, Sandra. We are hearing from the suspect for the first time in his own words with this 2011 interview at an Occupy protest in St. Louis, shot by Fox affiliate KTVI.
The 99% are getting pushed around, and the 1% are just not giving a
Page bearing the suspect's name, James Hodgkinson, carries the same themes, including photos of Bernie Sanders as well as anti-Trump rhetoric. An Illinois newspaper reports that the suspect sent letters to the editor a year after that rally, and he railed against Republicans and tax policies, writing, "I have never said life sucks, only the policies of the Republicans." Today, the ATF is tracing 2 weapons, a shotgun and a rifle, as a neighbor of the suspect tells Fox about an incident in Belleville, Illinois last March that only stopped after the police were called in.
I yelled at him. I said, "Hey, stop shooting over there. There's houses over there and everything." And I didn't get any kind of a notion from him that he heard me or that he even cared.
So you came out and said you didn't tell him to stop?
No, we just made sure that, he knew about the safety risks, and there is homes around here, and that we wanted to make sure that he understood all that. And once he did, he stopped.
An Illinois newspaper also reports that he had a violent history with one 2006 incident involving his foster daughter, but it was not enough to block him from legally owning, a firearm, Sandra.
All right, Catherine Herridge, thank you.
You're welcome.
Well, the shooting now putting a spotlight on the political rhetoric that has grown increasingly ugly since the presidential election. Just hours after the incident, Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown of Ohio appeared to place some blame on President Trump, saying he's dividing the country.
I don't blame the president for this. I don't blame any single political figure for this. But for whatever reason, unleashed in our country is more anti-Semitism and more race talk, more racism. And the president should also be the healer in chief. And instead this president's chosen to divide and name call, and that doesn't serve this country. It probably doesn't even serve his interests. It certainly doesn't serve his party's interests.
Meantime, Republican Congressman Chris Collins pointed the finger at Democrats and their anger toward the GOP. But this morning, the New York lawmaker walking back his remarks, saying both sides, including himself, need to tone it down. Watch.
I'm willing to admit that was wrong for me to say. That would actually be going in the wrong direction. And I myself am going to try to tone down some of my rhetoric, and I would invite my Democrat friends, and they are friends, to do likewise. And I think all of us have now had a chance to reflect, look in the mirror, and say, it's on all of us, and it is a 24/7 news cycle, and elections are coming up next year. And it's been an especially ugly 6 months.
But many lawmakers making impassioned pleas for unity after the shooting, reminding Americans that we're all in this together.
So before this House returns to its business, let's just slow down and reflect, to think about how we're all being tested right now, because we are being tested right now. I ask each of you to join me, to resolve, to come together, to lift each other up, and to show the country, to show the world that we are one house, the people's house, united in our humanity.
We need to have this deep respect for each other, whether we disagree politically, whether we come from a different place, whether we have a different religion or race, and actually know we can respect each other even while we disagree, and disagree strongly.
We have the right to be free in this country. We have the right to elect our leaders, and we have the right to go vote against them if we disagree with their policies. But we've got to ratchet down the rhetoric that we've seen, not only on social media, but in the media, in the 24-hour news cycle. These are the things that have to stop. This is a result, I believe, of political, rhetorical terrorism. That has to stop.
What's happened in our country over the last several years, and even more so last year, is the level of vitriol and harsh rhetoric has escalated to a point that I've never seen in my life. The thought that anyone would take somebody else's life or try to is just wrong. And to target a member of Congress, particularly in this baseball practice situation, is just terrible.
Well, that last congressman you saw in that clip, a Democrat, Ron Barber of Arizona, served as an aide to former Congresswoman Gabby Giffords and was with her when she was severely injured in a shooting back in 2011. He was also hurt in that attack. For the most part, the word is unity. A lot of lawmakers discussing that today. Is this a come-together moment?
I think it's possible, and here's why. I know we've had horrific shootings with more casualties, but never this close, never directly targeted at a party, at a bunch of players. You say, well, I wonder what he was up to when he shot him. There's a lot of different theories. No. He asked, this shooter, who's practicing? GOP lawmakers. Where are they doing it? Right by the Capitol. What are they doing it for? They're going to go play in a bipartisan game. And that's because they were targeted because of their party, and they were targeted by this guy because he's a Bernie Sanders supporter. And the fact that a few miles away is where everybody works, I think it drives things home. I think things could change. And I think if, for example, Madonna got up tomorrow and said, let's burn the White House down, I think that if you saw Kathy Griffin holding a picture of Donald Trump's alleged decapitated head, I think both parties would jump on and say, enough of this, where I think 48 hours ago the answer would have been, who cares?
But then still, Sherrod Brown, we all kind of had a reaction watching him say, it's not a time to point fingers, but then he went on to point fingers at Donald Trump for inciting this sort of environment.
Definitely. I mean, Sherrod Brown wanted to make a point about it, but also to be as PC as possible about it. I would add also that Mark Sanford, a Republican, said that Donald Trump was partially to blame for this, and I'm sure he's going to be walking it back soon. I think it is a unity moment. I would add to what Brian said that what happened to Gabby Giffords should have also been a unity moment at this level. I understand that no one said to her, are you a Democrat, and then shot her. But certainly, it was a political scene. There were political aides everywhere. And it's worrisome to me that we are still not any better, having seen this in 2011 and knowing of all the shootings that you alluded to. I mean, if we don't fix things post-Newtown, I don't know what we are as a country.
But it's not just the shootings. That's the thing. I mean, that's the thing that really bums me out about this. It's the convenient gun control narrative, and we don't know where the guy. I'm not talking about
gun control.
No, I know
we
that.
We will in a minute.
But Terry McAuliffe certainly did. But you have a guy, and it's not necessarily Donald Trump. It's also not necessarily Bernie Sanders.
I don't absolutely. Bernie Sanders responded right away.
Millions of followers who engaged in intense rhetoric and political passion on social media. They don't go out and target people. And when someone does target people, and when it is politically motivated, and when he is trying to change behavior, that is terrorism.
There is, however,
I think Rodney Davis was right about that when he categorized it as such. And there are two different things. One is the psychotic actions of a clearly mentally unstable, murderous person. The only reason this wasn't a murder is because that guy was a horrible shot. That's one thing. The political rhetoric and maybe being curious about other people's political backgrounds and how they came to their opinions, that's a completely separate
There's a very different
conversation.
There's a big difference between political passion and caring about a particular point of view and getting that viewpoint across, and then what we've crossed over into, which is frankly losing all sense of decency, all sense of humanity. What Kathy Griffin did. Let me share with you, there was a professor at the Art Institute of Washington, Dr. John Griffin, who weeks earlier had said all the Republican Party members on Capitol Hill should be lined up and shot. I mean, that is crossing a line where it is no longer about the political ideals which are at stake, and it's turning it into something else where we are losing our sense of who we are as a country,
Jessica,
and who we are as human beings.
I want to bring in some of these headlines. This running in some major papers. The New York Times, this headline, America's lethal politics. LA Times, reaction to shooting reveals a nation that doesn't just disagree, it hates. The Boston Globe, after Alexandria shooting, both parties owe the nation a more civil political dialogue. Jessica?
Oh, I totally agree with that. I do think we have a rhetoric problem. We also do have a gun problem, and I know that we will discuss that. I'm not sure whenever the time is right to talk about it. It seems like we should perennially be talking about it until we do have stricter laws. But as to what you said, Trish, I mean, just last week, Donald Trump Jr. came on this network and he said the Democrats weren't even humans. I mean, that's coming from the president's son. So this isn't just a liberal problem that we use harsh rhetoric here. This is both sides.
That's not a call to kill.
No, I'm not saying that it is, but just bringing up the rhetoric point and saying we need a civil discourse, we need that from the White House as well.
Do you think this guy would have killed people with a firebomb or his cargo van if he didn't have access to weapons?
Oh, yeah, I think this is just it's a lunatic
gun problem.
Absolutely. I would just like to add this. I think part of it fundamentally is our politics are all or nothing right now. Yeah. You win, you have the White House, you have the House, you have the Senate. I lose. So you're losing for at least 2 years, maybe 4 years. It's a horrible feeling for a competitive country. So the whole compromise thing is out the window. If you compromise, you lose your job. If you have tax reform and you bring in some democratic principles, you've sold out your soul. So I think there might be something to, okay, we lose, we're in the minority. We're not going to get as much, but maybe we don't have to get zero. So right now, Mitch McConnell's, the only way he can get forward with Obamacare in the current situation is to do it behind closed doors, literally, not even tell his own party and move it forward. It might be the work of genius. It might be just fantastic, but it just creates anger because everyone's locked out of it, including the Republicans. When you do it, there's no more coming across the aisle. Actually, coming across the aisle is Republicans coming together with Republicans.
Well, and the other thing, to your point, is if you express any sort of interest in the ideas that the president has talked about, not the president as a person, and you do that with someone who has an opposing viewpoint, you are the enemy. I mean, you will see no quicker way of losing friends than if you go
saw
on.
this with Kevin Plank, right? I mean, the CEO of Under Armour, he came out and said, yeah, I like some of the economic ideas that Donald Trump is proposing.
He lost Steph Curry
and people went nuts, right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
He lost a bunch of athletes, and they're not coming to the White House.
And I think there are plenty of CEOs right now that are very reluctant to say, yes, I think we need tax reform. I like what Donald Trump is talking about in terms of repeal and replace. They don't want to say it because they are fearful that the other side is going to come after them in a way that
look at climate change. After the president said he was going to pull out of the Paris Accord, you know, the advisors, the corporate advisors to the president, several of them pulled out. Because of the political incorrectness.
He can't possibly be somebody you can work with if he goes against
or because they believe in climate change and they think that it's a radically bad decision for the United States to stop leading.
Don't you want to have a voice at the table, though? I mean, what they're doing is
it's just us and Assad who are saying no to this. Nicaragua isn't part of it because it doesn't go far enough. We're alone with a massive load of it.
That was just
how dare you?
I think I can speak for all of us when our thoughts and prayers are with Congressman Scalise and his family as he tries to make a recovery, still in the hospital, more surgeries to come. All right, meantime, this didn't take long. It took just 3 hours after yesterday's shooting for a top Democrat to call for more gun control. Whether this was the right time, we debate that. Plus, President Trump firing back after it was reported that the special counsel overseeing the Russia investigation is looking into whether he tried to obstruct justice. The president's lawyer pointing out that the story comes from yet another illegal leak amid questions about the special counsel's neutrality. And after the show, you can join our live chat by clicking on the Overtime tab at foxnews.com/outnumbered FNC or go to facebook.com/outnumbered FNC. Brian Kilmeade, you're going to stick around, right?
If you want.
We're asking him now because he's on
my best work on the internet.
All right, you can also tweet us. We look at those during the show. We'll see you after the show as well.
Welcome back to Outnumbered. It didn't take long after yesterday's shooting attack on a gathering of GOP lawmakers for the ongoing debate over guns to be renewed. Just 3 hours after news broke that Congressman Steve Scalise and others had been shot, Governor Terry McAuliffe, Democrat of Virginia, called for greater gun restrictions. Watch.
There are too many guns on the street. We lose 93 million Americans a day to gun violence. I mean, I've long talked about this. Background check, shutting down gun show loopholes. You know, that's not for today's discussion, but it's not just about politicians. We worry about this every day for all of our citizens.
Do you mean to say 93 million? That's a big number. Are you sure about
93 million, 93 individuals a day.
Oh, big difference there. We'd be out of people by the weekend.
Right.
Yeah, you know, this isn't the time for that conversation, but I'm going to go ahead and have it. That's what he was saying. Other Democrats steered clear of that debate, including gun control advocates like Senator Chuck Schumer. Watch.
I was absolutely shaken by the news of a shooting early this morning at the baseball field in Alexandria, where many of my friends and colleagues were practicing for the annual congressional baseball game, an event that brings us together each year. Let us pray that they and any others who are injured are able to recover quickly. This morning is the most sobering a reminder of how thankful we should be for the service of the Capitol Police Force.
Meantime, Georgia Congressman Barry Loudermilk, a member of the GOP baseball squad who was on the scene, says Congress should explore allowing lawmakers to carry weapons to defend themselves. In fact, a fellow Republican minutes ago saying he's introducing a bill that would allow reciprocity for those who have concealed carry permits from their home states to carry them in Washington. And Texas Republican Roger Williams, who was also there, says he would have been much more comfortable with a gun at the field.
We were sitting ducks. I mean, we had nothing to fight back with but bats if it got to that.
Would you feel safer if you had the ability to carry a gun, including on the Capitol premises and other places where the general public isn't allowed?
Remember two things. Well, first of all, I'm for the Second Amendment, big Second Amendment guy, and I'm from Texas. So yes, I would have felt a lot more comfortable if we were able to do that.
And he's absolutely right about that, Brian. All of those people would be dead if it weren't for guns. Guns saved people's lives yesterday.
Right, and Senator Schumer gets it, and here's why. Because he knows his colleagues would have felt helpless. And their instinct weren't like, I can't believe this guy has a gun. Their instincts are, I can't believe I don't have a gun to shoot back. Because for the most part, you want to be able to defend yourself, but you have no shot against these cowards who want to stand back with a rifle they obviously don't know how to use and take you out. I'll add something else to this whole thing. For the most part, these assassins don't want to be going to situations where they're in a fight. They like massacres. Yeah. So they want, if they knew there was a chance of these lawmakers with a gun, they probably wouldn't have picked that. They like really soft targets.
Absolutely. Like, I don't know, gun-free zones oftentimes, which is what they typically target. So, Jessica, I think it is an inappropriate time to have this discussion because we don't know where he got the guns. A lot of people are pointing out
a permit at home in Illinois.
Yeah, but a lot of people are pointing out that there are lax gun laws in Virginia, as though somehow that would go into his factoring and critical thinking, being steps away from D.C., where it's very hard to get a gun permit.
Yeah, absolutely. And returning to what we were talking about in the first block, it's not the right time, but it's also the right time to be talking about it because guns were used in this. This was a lunatic, but that was his weapon of choice. He got it from Illinois here. I was looking up some statistics that I thought were interesting. In the last year, there have been 300,000 guns that were purchased without a background check, according to the FBI. And this is after all of the discussion post-Charleston, where Dylan Roof was able to get around the system and get a gun and walk into the church and kill 9 people. And that weighs heavy on all of us, just as Newtown does, as what Gabby Giffords happened to her. I mean, we didn't even talk about that shooting that happened in the UPS facility because we were all paying attention to what happened to Steve Scalise. I mean, this is a daily occurrence. So I understand that there is a unity moment that needs to be had here, but it's also important to talk about the weapon of choice that is being used in these crimes by lunatics who can get their hands on them.
Yeah, but nowadays with other terrorists, though. Yeah, exactly right.
I mean, they'll use
in other terrorist strikes that we've seen, especially in the UK, yeah, I mean, we saw it at Ohio State where a guy tried to ram his car into a bunch of people, and he was
sometimes I think this
stopped by law enforcement.
Right? In other words, we need to be talking about how we improve the political conversation and basically don't encourage these crazies to do what they're doing. The whole gun control issue. Look, I'm from, I've said this before, live free or die, New Hampshire. Okay, we were not a big gun family, but I knew a lot of people that were. They hunted. You have a right to protect yourself. That's all good. I'm with you in that we can use more in the way of background checks. Nothing wrong with that. You might as well, if you get a driver's license, you have to go through a certain amount of training to get the driver's license. We could do the same thing with guns. But this is not the time necessary to be talking about this. This is the time to be talking about how we improve our rhetoric so that people aren't feeling this vitriol.
I want to bring Sandra in because you actually are very comfortable around firearms. You have been trained.
I am, but I think the question goes back to, do you think that this man, based on everything we have learned about his past and what his political strong political words that he has used on social media and all these things that he wanted to do away with Trump and company, do you think that he would have carried out this act even if he didn't have a gun as his weapon?
I think that he would have done something. This was a man clearly teetering on the edge. I just think that to only focus on this one incident ignores the countless lives, not 93 million a day, but 93 a day, that are taken as a result of gun violence. So yes, I think he would have rammed his car and he would have done anything.
Which are unfairly wrapped up in those statistics. And to your point about driver's licenses, having a driver's license in a car is not implicit in the Constitution, nor should it be. All right, the plot thickens in the Russia probe amid reports that Special Counsel Robert Mueller is now focusing on whether President Trump obstructed justice. But the president today calling